There we go. Delta Sigma Theta, where are you? There we go. I see some Kappas out there. What did Noob say? All right. Alpha Phi Alpha. There we go. Omega Psi Phi, where are you? No Omegas. Zeta Phi Beta, where are you? Where are those doves? There we go. Sigma Gamma Rho. There we go. And then I also see the beautiful colors of, I'm sorry, Phi Beta Sigma. There we go. There we go. I see you. I see you. But it's, you know what? It's the light here that I can't see just a little bit. There we go. All right. Well, welcome to Making Black America. One more? Iota Phi Theta. There we go. I'm so sorry about that. There we go. We're all representing the Divine Nine. Let's give everyone a round of applause. There we go. My name is Ray Cornelius from Atlanta's jazz station, 91.9 WCHT. Inside the entertainment industry on Saturday mornings. And it gives me a pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to this collaborative event between WCLK, Atlanta's jazz station, and WABE 90.1. Let's give both stations. We thought it was just an amazing idea to come together to talk about and celebrate and discuss this amazing documentary, Making Black America, which puts a spotlight on our contribution to this country. And we've got an amazing discussion for you all tonight. I've been tasked to introduce our host. We all know her as Rose Scott, host of Closer Look on WABE. But she is my sister in media. I've known Rose for over 20 years. And we go to concerts together. We do a lot of stuff together. We talk every Sunday morning and just catch up and see how we're all doing. And so I'm so honored to bring her to the stage to introduce the panel. And let's give it up for Miss Rose Scott.
Good to see you, Ray.
Big R is what I have to call it.
Thank you so much. Wow. Ain't it great to be black? Ray wanted me to come out dressed like Viola Davis and the Woman King. I was like, no, Ray, they're not ready for that yet. But wow, thank you all. On behalf of WCLK, and I just really want to say this. That is where I started my career in public media back in 1998, 99 at WCLK. And I met Ray and so many other people. And then from there, I went to WABE. So it is an honor to be part of this night because both of those institutions have been so instrumental in who I am and what I do and why I do it for the community. So to WCLK, to WABE, thank you all so much. And thank you all for sharing in our space tonight. I know the weather, it's a little rainy out there, so I appreciate you venturing out to join us. You know, you cannot talk about the making of America without talking about the trauma, the horrors, the discrimination, the systemic issues that still plague this nation. However, despite all of that, the making of Black America has come through all of that, and it is to be celebrated, and it is to be honored, and it is to be examined, and it is to be criticized as well. And that's what this is about tonight. And so when we think about what our dear friend Dr. Skip Gates did with this documentary, which is really an examination of how Black America came to be throughout everything. And so we'll show you some clips tonight, and we'll even show you that, we'll tell you where after tonight you can watch the series again on WABE TV. I have to say that. I think my CEO is here, so I have to say that. But we hope that you check it out, and if you can, also watch it on demand. Now, I'm going to bring out our panel because I could stand up here and talk all night about making Black America, because I am Black America. But that's right, give it up. But but we have a panel that is just outstanding. And I'm going to start with the youngin. I'm going to bring out, he is from Clark Atlanta University. He is the Student Government Association President, Mr. Keandre Thomas. Also from WCLK, a veteran radio executive and now program director at WCK, Mr. David C. Linton. From Spelman College, I know Spelman's out there, and I've had many, there we go, yeah, I know y'all got that little thing that y'all do. I don't know if I'm allowed to do it, don't beat me up, but she is Dr. Cynthia Neal Spence. She is the Spelman College Associate Professor of Sociology and Director of the UNCF Mellon Programs. And last but certainly not least, if you listen to Closer Look, you know I have 3 professors from area universities. I call them the Big Three. He's the number 1 of the Big Three, but I say that about every time I interview any one of them. But it's Ilya Davis from Morehouse College. He's the director of the New Student and Transition Programs. So to help shape what our conversation is going to be all about tonight, I'm going to play one of the clips. It's an introductory clip to the series Making Black America with our dear friend, Dr. Henry Louis Skip Gates.
striving incessantly for genuine equality. As noble and as heroic as this chapter in our history has been, that's only part of the story.
Black America has never been a monolith. For me, one of the challenges and the beauties is to try to talk about all of Black America's plural.
Black Americans have, with great ingenuity and imagination, created a world on the other side of the color line. A world with its own values and rules. A world defined by unfettered racial self-expression. A world behind what W.E.B. Du Bois called the veil.
There's a sort of opacity to the veil. You can see through it, but you can't see clearly. There's so much richness to Black life and Black culture that happens out of the view of white people.
At the heart of our story are the networks Black Americans built for survival and for sheer pleasure and joy.
As Black people, we've always had networks. Always. From the moment we were thrown on
Grapevine telegraph. And the grapevine is as old as the American Revolution.
When we talk about networks of black people and associations of black people, we're talking about different types of associations. There's a social type. But then you also have fraternal, the sororities and fraternities, and also intellectual organizations.
From the founding of their own places of worship and the Prince Hall Masons to the flowering of BLM and Black Twitter, African Americans have forged networks in their own image as the ultimate act of resistance and survival.
When everything around you is telling you that you're worthless, that you're ugly, that you're not human, you need spaces where you feel like you're outside of the white gaze.
We still see a strong stream of hostilities towards black and brown people within this country, and we still need shelters in a time of storm. In some ways, that storm is intensifying.
When you think about what blackness is, I've asked them to think about it. And the reason I'm opening with these questions, because I asked myself that question this morning. I'm getting ready. Yeah, sisters, y'all know, doing our hair, twisting my hair. And I'm saying, what is that first question I want to talk to the panel about? What do I want them to think about? And I said, well, what would be a question I want someone to ask me about what it means to be black in America? But then I thought, Rose, when was the first time you embraced or you understood what your blackness was all about? And then I thought, that is the question that I want to open with. And so, Professor Spence, I'm going to start with you. Can you recall and think back when you could fully embrace and understand and absorb what your blackness was all about?
You know, Rose, you know, I grew up in the city of Atlanta. So I say that I grew up somewhat privileged because I grew up seeing blackness all around and black excellence all around me. And, you know, I heard the music, you know, whether or not my mother was playing it on the record player, which some people here might not know what I'm talking about, or, you know, it was, you know, the rhythm of being black, my mother and her friends dancing, or my dad, you know, talking about black issues. So it was just a part of who I was, and I believe that my parents were very intentional in terms of protecting us, because I was born in 1957. And so, you know, that's when we're starting to move towards some changes. So the first time, though, that I realized that blackness could regulate my life was when, and I've heard others, my contemporaries share this story. We would come home from school, and some people in this audience who might be my contemporary might remember this, and we'd watch Officer Don and the Popeye show. You know, it was a little cartoon show. And we'd watch it, and they'd have, on that one television, right? Mm-hmm. And they'd have this commercial about Funtown. It was an amusement park, and they showed the little kids going to Funtown. And I said, I want to go to Funtown. And my mother said, you can't go to Funtown, because colored people can't go to Funtown. And that was my first recognition that there was something different about my blackness that could limit me, because I was surrounded by possibility all of the time.
Wow.
So I think that's like the first time that I knew that there was joy with it, but also there were restrictions that were imposed.
Keandre, what about you?
So very similar. I grew up in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands in the Caribbean, where it's predominantly black. You know, all I saw was black excellence. My governor was black. Our legislature was black. All I saw was amazing people doing amazing things all along. But in regard to your question, when did I realize I was black? I think the underlying question is, when did I became conscious that, you know, being black meant that I couldn't do certain things. And it really wasn't until my senior year of high school, when I think that's when I really realized it, when my mom began having conversations with me about, you know, you're going to the mainland, and, you know, there are certain things that you can and cannot do. Look at the news. This is happening. these young black men are getting pulled over and officers are racially profiling them. And out of those conversations for fear, I understood that there were certain things that I couldn't do, or the training of, if you get pulled over, put your hands on the wheel, and those conversations didn't arise until I actually had to go to mainland America.
Wow.
So I think that's when I really realized, that I was black and what that meant to be black. Even in all of its glory, that there were still restrictions.
In all of its glory, amen to that. Professor Davis.
Well, first, thank you. I'm glad to be participating. But it's very interesting because when you posed the question prior to us beginning, I don't recall thinking about it. I grew up here in Atlanta. My mother, having lived in John Hope Homes for a while, lived in Carver Homes. I grew up in a black nationalist house. And so white people were understood, with all due respect, to be inferior. And I just never imagined otherwise. And it was not until I went to school, well, not even when I went to school, we would condescend to them. So 1972, I was in the second grade. And when I remember starting the school, which was then Utoy Springs, right off Danforth Road. And in 1 year, my school went from 90% white to 90% black. 1 year. Wow. 1 year. We celebrated. I mean, and I hate to say this, but I was literally thinking it was very much black nationalists. So my mother never completed high school, but she was the head majorette at Carver High School. And so that disposition was imbued in all of her children, such that she celebrated blackness every day. I was talking to Brother Edward Moses, who's here, and in 1976, when he was running, my mother was probably running faster than him in place. Every opportunity to celebrate blackness. For a short period, Curtis Mayfield lived down the street from me, right next to us, Keen Atwood Trail. Around the other side, Hank Aaron. So it was always about black people, black people. So when I saw white people, it was something of an anomaly for me, thinking, like, where do you live and what do you all do? And I can't imagine it. But interesting, the paradox is I grew up with white television. Yeah. Andy Griffith, Gomer Pyle. And it was always interesting that I never really looked for black people. It was as if black people had a life that they were missing out on. And so as far as I was concerned, the black music, the black culture, I went to black church, my family was black, I was even killed. And so when you ask that, it's very difficult to imagine not giving preeminence to blackness because it was fundamentally animating my entire life. My mother celebrated blackness like you can't believe. It was not until I got older that I finally say white people might be equal. And it was just a matter of how we behaved. Muhammad Ali was my greatest hero. Yeah. So I was growing up listening to him. I'm the greatest, black this, black, 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 black. So it's just, that's a profound question you asked. That's a paper. Because I never thought about it. It was always the norm. Yeah. And I thought other people were missing out.
I mean, everybody went playing spades Saturday after church.
Yeah. After church.
David, what about you?
Well, for me, I grew up in New York City, Brooklyn, New York. But for me, Bed-Stuy, and Bed-Stuy when I was growing up is not the same Bed-Stuy it is today. But on April 4th, 1968 is when I came face to face with my blackness and that there was a difference. Because that was the night Dr. King was killed. And we were out, I remember like yesterday, I was out playing with my friends and my mother said, David, they can call me by another name, but that's none of your business. But they come home, and my friend's mother was on his stoop. We had stoops because we lived in brownstones, and they called him upstairs. And Bed-Stuy at that time, was a middle class, working class community. It was nice. My grandfather owned the brownstone that we lived in, and he owned several other brownstones. So, but on that night, in a matter of hours, the streets erupted. There's a section in Brooklyn called Broadway. We used to go and shop there. It was destroyed. And then I started watching TV and we saw what was going on across the country. and what was going on. And then what brought it home for me, my parents, every summer I went to spend the summers in South Carolina. When I came back that summer, 1968, my parents, we moved to Queens. We did the George Jefferson. We did a little moving on up. Got a little private home, little grass in the backyard. We were doing something. But then we were in an integrated neighborhood. And that's when I saw people and kids looking at you like you're different. You know, people wanting to know, why is your hair like that? And I'm like, why is your hair like that? But that was the time when it really, and then my mother was really an activist because when we moved to this new territory, this new community, we were in District 27. And there were neighborhood schools, but there were other schools. But they were making sure, they were trying to keep us in certain parts of schools, but we were eligible to go to the other schools. My mother went to school board meetings, and we fought, and we were able to go to the schools in an area called Howard Beach. Anybody know about John Gotti? We went to those schools, and we weren't wanted in those schools. And so people always say, you know, I'm in New York, I never knew about racism. That's crap. If you lived there and you really lived there, you knew what racism was and you saw it. But that's when we galvanized and we started really to understand that there was two Americas, but we were like you. They were missing out on something. And that's why to this day, I don't like to be referred as a minority because that's a psychological game. I'm not minor to anything. So that was when I first came face to face with it.
Wow. Y'all waiting on my story?
Yes, yes.
How many sisters in here have got their hair pressed when they was little? How many of you still have a little bitty scarf when your mama, a big mama was pressing that hair and she say, hold your ear, and you doing other stuff. So, you know, hair in my family is like gold, how you wear your hair. And I have aunties that wore wigs. But then my mother was like, wigs. No, my mother would wear this big afro, and she'd come pick me up from school, and the kids like, why your mama got that big afro? And I'm like, hey, my mama's cool. But hair for me, and I would ask my mother, I would say, Mama, why you press my hair? And she would say, well, do you not want me to press your hair? Because I want it to look nice. I said, well, I want my hair to look like yours. I want an afro. And my mama stopped pressing my hair. And she said, if you don't want me to press your hair anymore, I won't do it. And my hair has been natural. And I did when I got older, I started doing perms, but it was something about, I did not feel connected to my lineage. And I'm not, if you want to get a perm, no, please don't tweet. Rose Scott said, sisters should get some perms. You know how y'all get. But there was a connection. And then there's this episode, I promise you're going to get back to this. There's this episode of Good Times. Remember when Thelma was dating African? What's his name? eBay? What's his name? And she had the braids, and I said, I want that. And my mother would put my hair in cornrows and braids and the beads, and I just felt this sense of pride. And I would see the ebonies and the jets, and I was like, I saw those beautiful black women. I was like, I want to look like them. That's how I want to wear my hair. And when I started interviewing for jobs in television, I had and this was a person of color tell me, you need to straighten your hair and get a nose job. So all this continued, yes. Get a nose job and straighten your hair. Aren't y'all glad I didn't do that?
Yeah.
Pastor Davis, I want to come back to you because when we have conversations, and we've been having conversations, I think, since right after we first met when Trump was elected. In 2016. When you think about today, and we're going to connect this to the past in a moment, but when you think about those same systemic issues that black folks are fighting against, what is that, and it can't be one, but there are these optics about who we are as black people as relates to perseverance and grit that we still come through somehow, even through the pain, even through the trauma. So we're still fighting some of the systemic issues, but our culture and who we are as black people somehow either brings us together or at least it's supposed to. And we get through it. Where does that come from?
Wow. She saved the most difficult. You know, it's very interesting. We've had similar conversations in this regard. one of the biggest things is to maintain the complexity of black life. So there is no way to oversimplify.
Right.
And I think it's very important to maintain that. Why is that important? Because part of what I think is happening, individuals trying to appropriate a false sense of legitimacy. And so trying to be legitimate undermines the integrity of what it means to be black and the diversity and the possibilities of being black. So as you intimated, one of the fundamental problems is trauma. Years and years of trauma. And you have different theorists, some of them social sciences and others who want to give an account and possibly even assert that you can transfer trauma from generation to generation. That very well may be the case. What's most important is for the generation now to understand their own drama. One essay I have students read is What is Enlightenment by a dead white racist. And Immanuel Kant, if you wanted to look it up. The first line of What is Enlightenment is humanity's emergence from self-imposed immaturity. And what's important is many of our problems are self-imposed. Whether or not it's the way you think of yourself, the way you fail to imagine being in the world differently than what you've been told, to somehow rebuff the stereotypes and these false images of legitimacy. So I always tell students, I love Kendrick, but Kendrick doesn't have to say nigga. He doesn't have to say that. What's the assumption behind doing these types of things? You know, you become legitimate. You become appropriate to a particular sector. And I'm saying, what would it mean to raise the game, brother, and say love or brother or friend? And so the trauma is always there. Another issue is, and you've heard people talk about this before, and that is this tendency toward what might be a form of nihilism. There are at least two forms of nihilism. There are many. But one form is what we call disorientation. The idea that there are no universal ways of understanding truth. And the idea is that the one who suffers from nihilism is overwhelmed by the inability to answer the questions of why, right? Why suffering? Why pain? Why did the police murder? And I do this intentionally. Not just one man, but there were multiple killed that day somewhere we didn't have a camera. That's why I normally don't call names, because I'm saying calling a name undermines the integrity, because we caught that one. But then that's one form. The other form is despair, knowing that there are possibilities that you cannot actualize. So you have disorientation. There is no answer to your suffering. Despair, you think there's an answer, but you can't acquire it. And it creates trauma. Imagine living in a world where you cannot answer. It's total silence. And this level of despair overwhelms people. And then you begin to sublimate. You begin to try to figure out how to be in the world. So you use various types of medicinal products, if you will, to somehow relieve some of the stress. And I understand that. I always tell my students, I feel you. Whenever I tell them not to engage, it's not a matter of moral claim. It's a matter of practicality. How lucid are you? Are you afraid to listen to the wanderings of your own mind when you're sober that it scares the hell out of you? You got to get high. And that's a problem. So to your point, Rose, we live in a time where we fail to understand the complexity, to maintain the complexity. We want the simple answer. We can't endure. And I got two of my students here today. They hear me all day long. Come on. Learn to bounce. Don't break. When you hit the ground, bounce up. And I think if you look at all the models that we deal with right now, especially since we gave COVID as the release valve, right? Anything that's wrong, oh, it must be COVID. Right? They didn't do their homework. Well, you know they went through COVID, right? And so I tell people, don't give them the language. If it's COVID, let it be COVID. But don't tell them, well, I know why you're failing. It's COVID, right? And so my thing is we have to maintain the complexity, understand the condition we're in, and then the last thing is never to assume that you get past trauma, you live through it. Trauma goes nowhere. Any good counselor, let alone a psychologist, will tell you, you will have this for life. Your responsibility is how is it that you maintain some level of psychological sobriety such that you can wake up in the morning and believe, based on your imagination of a better world, that you can still live, right? This is the fundamental problem. And so we got to be a little harder on ourselves and others to encourage them. Fight. We're still here. And we have no rationality for it. There's no reason for black people to be alive. Reason. Reason is what I'm saying. Because reason follows very sort of formal syllogistic structures. There is none. But based on a faith in a God, faith in a culture, faith in a people. We're here. And so just maintain the integrity of who we are, the complexity of who we are. Allow that complexity never to be oversimplified, and avoid this notion of there is some essential way of being black such that all of us would aspire to it.
Who want to follow that? But I do want to bring in our future. And Keandre, when you hear what the professor talks about, don't just break, bounce. You're about to graduate. I'm not going to tell them where you're going to work, but you got a good job, y'all. You did, brother. How much you making? No, I'm just kidding. When you hear what the professor says about don't break, bounce back up. And then I know you have conversations with your fellows about what do you do if you see cops in the rearview mirror, or someone approaching you and accusing you of something. I don't know if you've dealt with that or not, but what conversations do y'all have about that, what it takes, that resilience that it takes?
I think mental health right now is very big among our generation. And very similarly, a lot of times we use some of these things as crutches. And we say, oh, because this happened, well, I can't go forward. But talking through these issues, right, is very big right now. And I think we bounce back because we realize that it's not only us going through these same situations. As blacks, it may not be as explicit as it was prior to, but we all feel those little microaggressions. And through those microaggressions, we are able to kind of come together at HBCUs, or whether it be fraternities, and a lot of the social clubs that were mentioned in the video, we are able to come together and have those open conversations about, it's not no more people burning down Tulsa, but now maybe they're underfunding HBCUs, and maybe they're doing these very subtle systemic things. But we're able to come together and talk about these issues, and we're open about it. We're not hiding it anymore. We're not saying that, oh yeah, this is this facade. No, we know it's true. And, as the younger generation, we're trying to push through that.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
I just want, I appreciate everything that you said, and I amen it. But I also want to make certain that as we talk about the complexities of the black experiences, that we recognize our own positions of privilege when we do these assessments of what's happening in our community, so we can articulate the experiences in a certain way. And we can access the resources in a certain way because of our positions of privilege, even as black people, because there's great diversity that exists within the community. But we have to understand that everybody doesn't have the tools that we're telling them that they must have. And so we bear the responsibility of trying to help to equip individuals to be able to understand some of the circumstances that you're suggesting here and to be able to bounce. It's easy for me to say you should be able to bounce because I got resources to bounce. I know how to pick up a phone or call someone. I've got a community of people around me. That's not necessarily the experience of all blacks. I agree with everything that you're saying, but I just think as black people, we're not a monolith. And, we're often talking about the black community, we black people, but we're not a monolith. And we need to understand that there's great diversity of experience, resources, and tools. And so it is incumbent upon us who have the resources to be able to help others share their voice, not give them a voice, but let them share their voices. And then we can help provide some of these tools so that they can bounce. So I just think it's, we have to be very careful in saying, oh yeah, well, you just got, we lived through the trauma. Yeah, we can live through the trauma, but you got to have something there. Some people don't even have faith. Yeah, and see, faith is what brought our ancestors through. And it's not that they don't have faith because they're bad people. They just don't have it. They just don't have it. So I just want to say
that if we take away the metaphor of bouncing, I don't feel no ways tied is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about bouncing back good. Bouncing back may mean you're traumatized. Bouncing back might mean you have scars. Bouncing back might mean you want to stop living, but you must bounce because black folk have bounced from 1619 to about 3 minutes ago. And what I'm saying is it's an idea of living In fact,
in spite of.
But not even in spite. It's with the fact of suffering. So what I'm saying is, one cannot remove oneself from the suffering. What we have a tendency to do is, you'll get over it one day. You'll eventually get better. No, you won't. No, you won't. And you're going to have to figure out how to live knowing it's not getting better. You got to keep it going. And I'm using examples of my big mama who didn't finish 6th grade, my mother who didn't finish high school. It has nothing to do in that level of elitism. It has to do with me watching black women say, damn it, I got to do it. My mother worked 3 jobs cleaning white people's houses when I went to school. So the model is not bounce like a ball, you're better now. It's bounce as in if I don't get up, who do I lean on? Where do I turn? And it doesn't have to be religious faith. The faith is in a people. The faith is in the culture. The faith is in the culture. The faith is in the music. I mean, I tell students all the time, they think I'm an atheist. But my point is, because, no, but the issue is, and they'll tell you, it's not a matter of me referring to some Judeo-Christian religious symbol. It's the idea is I see you. So I always tell students, when I see you, you motivate me to wake up in the morning, right? I get it from you because I see so much inert powers in you that I'm going to beat your behind such that I need you not for me, but for the next generation, that first grader who can't read, that Booker T. Washington kid who's trying to figure out if they should just quit and do something else. So it's not a matter of, I don't want some superficial saccharine notion of bouncing. It's more a matter of when you hit, I don't want you to stay on the floor. Right? You got to say to yourself, if you fall, what is it, the famous quote? You fail again, fail better. I mean, the point is, and also, is I was taught by somebody, fail as soon as you can. Right? You got to fail as soon as you can, as much as you can, because if you wait to fail, that's what we call trauma too.
Oh, man. David, you know, WCLK has its place, besides being the jazz voice of the city, but also working very closely with students. And that's something I miss in working with students. When you hear Keandre and others who are looking to our generation, but they may say, well, why do I have to acknowledge what happened in the past? What do you tell them?
Well, I always tell them, and this is really, you know, one of the reasons I came back to public radio. I started in public radio, went off to a career in the music industry, probably worked with every hip-hop artist from 1988 up until about 2005. And I had a lot of these conversations with those hip-hop artists. And what I tell students today, you have to be equipped. That's the beauty of the HBCU experience. It's a nurturing environment. HBCUs give you not only you get the best book education, but you get the skills on how to survive outside of that cocoon and that safety net. And what I tell students as we enter, and because students really they look at broadcasting, but they're more into social media, they're more into podcasting, but I tell them all of that, it all comes down to communications. And so what we try to continually instill in them is that you have to know your past. Because see, one thing, and this is my personal philosophy, and I share it with them, is that you're black in America. Okay, let's start there. So you don't use that as an excuse. You know, like this, that. No, that's the base. You're going to be that. That's going to be it. So where do we go from there? As you said, the trauma is there, so how do we going to move through it? And it's for us to share and show them, because you say everybody doesn't have, but you have to know your history. We are sometimes actually, if we're ashamed of slavery. Our Jewish brothers and sisters say never forget, and we shouldn't forget. We should sit and tell people and tell us how they came over, because that's encouraging. You know, our ancestors came here with nothing, and they built a country. If you really want to know it, you know, so you can do it, and so that balance is that, like, there's going to be failures and mishaps, but you really have to see through. Where do you want to be? When I speak to students, I was speaking to a group of students one time when I was still working at a record label, and I asked a group of students, I said, where do you see yourself 5 or 10 years from now? And nobody could answer that, because some of them didn't even see themselves living that long. That was like, we have an issue here. And so what I had tried to always, you can, there is, like, when I went back, and this is, and I hope I'm answering your questions, but when I went back to New York, and I went back to my church in Harlem, you know, and I went, and I was driving a nice car. And one of the kids came up to me and said, how did you get that nice car? I said, well, first I went to college, I went to school, got a job. They said, you can go to work and go to school and drive a car like that? I thought only hustlers drove. Or you had to swing to ride it, and I was driving a Mercedes. That told me that we have a problem. Yeah. And so I'm constantly trying to pour into them, like what that young man just said about, you know, he sees a future. And that's what we have to tell our people, our children, and our students, that there's a future. And then you have to share your experience, and we have to show them how they got from point A to point B, whether it be faith, community. You know, that's what it's about. It takes a village. Yeah. And if we don't do that, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. It's just like when you can move out of the ghetto, as we did the George Jefferson, as I said, but my mother made sure that I didn't forget where I came from. And we had to go back and still kept my same friends, and so you have to do that, and that's what we have to do. Sometimes we leave, and when we leave that void, what takes the place? That's why the neighborhoods go by, because those of us who are able to escape never go back. Yeah. So, you know.
Thank you so much. You know, a big part of this series on PBS and Making Black America, you cannot omit the importance of the HBCUs. And I know Ray and I have conversations all the time where he talks about how a different world, when he watched A Different World, that really opened his eyes up to the possibilities of maybe going to an HBCU or even working at an HBCU. And you cannot be dismissive. You can talk about Yale's and Harvard, and no disrespect to the Ivy Leagues, but you know, our HBCUs have been beyond critical in shaping Black America. We're going to show you a clip from the series, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards.
African Americans. It was a form of civic participation, self-creation, self-actualization, and personal aspiration. Education had a value in and of itself.
Black colleges start in a whole variety of ways, right? They start in the basements of churches, they start in one-room classrooms, they start in sort of abandoned structures that had been left over from the war. They start through the government's Freedmen's Bureau with help from the American Missionary Association, with help from the African Methodist Episcopal Church and the AME Zion Church, and philanthropists.
In the midst of this low point in terms of racial violence, these institutions become protective spaces. And they're using these spaces to educate, but also to empower those same young Black people to see themselves as a wave of young folks who are going to begin to call out America's hypocrisy.
Black colleges understand the trauma, the disinvestment that their students arrive on campus with, and they see it as part of their mission to heal and rearrange the thinking that tells us that we cannot be the best and that we are not among the best.
The very first HBCU in the country was Cheyney University. The second was the University of DC. The third was Lincoln University. And the first independent HBCU funded and founded by Black people was Wilberforce.
Since 1837, more than 100 historically Black colleges and universities have been founded in the United States. Most in the half-century following the Civil War, and most in the South, where 90% of the Black population lived until the start of the Great Migration.
Professor Spence,
How long you been at Spelman?
I've been at Spelman all of my adult life. I have been at Spelman. I finished in 1978 and I returned in 1981 because a professor invested in me as a student, told me I should go to grad school. And when he recognized that I had returned to Atlanta, I was working on my dissertation, he said, do you want to come over here and teach a course? I said, okay, I'll come teach a course. And I've been there ever since. And I share that student because that's the story of HBCUs. The faculty at HBCUs, first of all, they see things in students that they don't even see in themselves. It is our job at HBCUs. First of all, we let our students know, you belong here. There's no question. You belong here. I tell my students, I get you smart. What else you got? Because you're supposed to be smart. But HBCUs have been investing in the transformation of individual students, and through the transformation of individual students, they said that we have been investing in the transformation of the world. Because we were the institutions that were founded to literally make a way out of no way. When they were founded, you had masses of uneducated black people at all levels. Most HBCUs started out as normal schools. So you had elementary school kids there, you had middle school kids, you had high school kids, and you may have somebody at college level. But we were founded to make a difference. And it's through the structure of HBCUs that we've created the black middle class. It was the only place that most black people could go until the late 60s and early 70s, when you started having predominantly white institutions opening up their doors. I mean, you had a few people to go through the cracks, Du Bois and others, who actually did, in fact, attain degrees at white institutions, but they were an anomaly. Our institutions were built to transform society, and that's what we've done. That's what we've done. That's what we do on a day-to-day basis. We know that our students are coming to us, the majority of them are of African descent. We know the data on the African American community. We know the income data on the African American community. Most of the students who attend our schools, their parents probably don't, or even their families don't have more than $50,000 a year. We know that, even at a place like Spelman College. We know that. So we know all the attendant consequences of growing up when you have resources that are limited. But yet we say, you walk into this door, you belong here, we're going to educate you, and we're going to send you on.
All right.
Yeah, that's been my story, and that's what I transfer into the classroom. That's what we do at HBCUs. We have saved this country. We have saved this country.
Keandre, why'd you pick Clark Atlanta University?
So, very different to some other students. They may have chose HBCU because they missed that bring up. As I stated earlier, I grew up in the Caribbean where I had that. For me, it was my uncle. He went to Clark Atlanta University. He spoke highly of the business program, all the internships, the experience that you got there. And I said, well, okay, I'll go. I'll see. I wasn't big on PWI versus HBCU. I just wanted an education. I knew I wanted an education. But I can say now, being that I'm so glad that I made this decision. The person that I came in to Clark Atlanta University as is not the person I'm leaving. And just to be able to connect with individuals who we may not have had the exact same life experiences, but there's some similarities in there. I have my friend who grew up with me I've known her since elementary school. She's in Georgia, but she goes to PWI. And the conversations are very different in regards to the classroom, in regards to the social life. And I'm really glad in hearing her stories. I'm glad where I chose. The smaller class settings where I know my professors know me. We have frequent conversations. I can have office hours where I sit and talk for times, and they help me, and they apply for this scholarship, apply for this internship, and they push me because the class sizes aren't extremely large, where they can't divide themselves up that much. So Yeah, like I said, I'm extremely glad I chose my HBCU, and I'm extremely glad I chose an HBCU.
And again, I'm not gonna put all this business out there, but you've already signed an offer sheet for after graduation,
Yes,
right?
I have.
And he's taking all of us to dinner. David Shaw, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Went to Shaw
What was it?
University,
Yeah.
Raleigh, North Carolina. And I made that decision based on weather. Because, to be honest, I didn't know what an HBCU was. Growing up in New York, I went to a prestigious high school, one of New York's 5 prestigious high schools, Brooklyn Technical High School. I thought I was going to be an architect. I had to take an exam to get in. Had high SATs, got accepted to Ithaca and Syracuse. The weather in the summer and the drifts, brother said no. I actually went and got my, and this is the honest truth, I went and got my college yearbook, my school, that, you know, with all the books, the colleges, and went and flipped through the schools and landed on Shaw University, Raleigh, North Carolina. Average temperature in the winter about 50, 55 degrees. Private, black Baptist. I'm black, I'm Baptist, I apply. And I was accepted. My mother was furious because she was like, "You've got accepted to these Ivy schools. Do you know what it means for a black man to get accepted to go to these Ivy schools?" And my father said, "Hold up, let him go where he wants to go, because if he goes where we want to go, he may not finish. But if he goes where he wants to go and he doesn't finish, it's on him." And so I went to Shaw University, and when I first got to the campus, downtown Raleigh, walked on the campus, first thing I said, "Where's the white people?" Because I'd never been to a college where there was all black people. All the universities, if I go to CUNY or any of the schools in New York, it was integrated. But it was the best decision of my life. I was, as he said, I knew my professors. They pushed me. I moved. I changed I was going to go in as a business major. I turned into a communications major. And I found a career. If you weren't in class, Dean Sewell said, "I didn't see you in so-and-so on Sunday. You weren't in chapel. Where were you?" So you were going to school with professors, but they were like your uncles and your aunties. And they created, and then from a broadcasting standpoint, I was able to put my hands on the equipment and learn my craft. And we used to do these competitions with Shaw University communication students up against UNC Chapel Hill communication students. And we used to wipe them out. And they had better equipment. I mean, I learned, guys, again, you talked about, record, but tapes, we learned to do edit. I didn't have an editing board and a grease pen. I had a scissors and Scotch tape. But I did some of the best production and went on to do my graduate work in North Carolina Central University. And then I worked at Elizabeth City State, where I started the radio station. But it was in that environment that I was nurtured and I was pushed. And it's funny that you said something. One of my professors, I said, I called him one day and I got this job. It was supposed to be a really big job. He said, "I'm not surprised." You're supposed to do that, right? And he's just talking about busting your bubble. But that's what those schools did, and I was so glad that I went to Shaw University. And my 2 sisters went to PWIs. I have friends for 40, 60 years, 50 years. They go to my homecoming. They don't even know. They don't have the same kind of experience. And I have lifelong friends, and so that's that community that we talked about earlier. I'm so glad I went to Shaw.
Before we get to our final clip, and I hope you all stay with us because we do have a treat at the end of this program. I saw the brothers from A5A over there. Y'all ready? Oh, I hope y'all ready. Professor Davis, when we talk about developing critical thinkers, I know there's an argument to be made that doesn't necessarily have to evolve from academia. But I'm talking to a philosophy professor, so I got to get this right. But when we talk about the importance of HBCUs and helping develop critical thinkers, not just for them to regurgitate back, but what they take out into the world, there is something unique about that developing in HBCU?
Definitely. So, very quickly, I attended Morehouse College, and I did not want to. And it was the precincts of my mother and my eldest sister. My eldest sister attended Clark College in the 70s. She would take me over to the campus, and back in the 70s, brothers were doing incense and sleep. And so on one occasion, I was allowed to spend the night with one of her friends. She was in the honors program at Clark. And they gave me over to him, and I went to the house. He was over in the West End, and I was just blown away. I go to this house, bunch of grown men. And, you know, he went in and whispered, I heard him, all right, y'all got to cut it out. Shorty's with me tonight, so, you know, whatever we go. I didn't understand what was going on. Incense going in the air. I opened the room door. His bed's a futon, books on the floor. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is college, right? And so my sister and my mother in cahoots told me I had to attend Morehouse College. I didn't know the difference between Morehouse and Morris Brown. I lived off Stewart Avenue, which is a mile and a half away from the campus. I had no idea what Morehouse was. I rode 13 West Fair bus every day to school, which passes Morehouse and Clark. I knew Clark, didn't know it was Morehouse. I thought it was Clark too. So I resisted, and after high school, I did not go to college because you can't tell me where to go. I'm not gonna do it. So I parked cars, right? I parked cars at the Hyatt Regency, and I parked cars at the Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead. If you ever want to recalibrate a youngster and get them to think deeply about life, have them do valet parking. Right? Everybody in here, you know how you treated a valet. You, be honest, you know how you've done. The point is, security to the point, it's very important for us to maintain all the stories that are here, the complexity, as I always argue. I refer to these schools as historically white colleges and universities, and I will even add racist. And so we have to maintain the integrity of what it means to be at a historical black college. We have a tendency to find common ground in our beginnings, but our schools are very different. And people want to just say, well, HBCUs, what do you mean? Spelman and Jackson State aren't the same, right? Fisk and Clark Atlanta University, they aren't the same, right? We don't have to undermine that integrity. So the critical thinking has to be, that's the first thing, to allow for your own particularity to come through. CAU has something that Morehouse doesn't, all right? So Cheney State would have had something that Lincoln didn't. Lincoln was all men and yada, 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 you know, and Kwame Nkrumah, Thurgood Marshall. I mean, everybody has a story. You must maintain that story. Do not allow them to become conflated as you black people's school, which is what they'll do, like the black schools. I went to white schools that white people would give body parts for to get in. And I knew it. And at each one of those campuses, I had to inform them, I attended Morehouse. I wore a Morehouse hat to class every day in graduate school to remind them and me, this is what it was about. I had a professor who didn't recognize me without my Morehouse hat. My advisor walked down the hall, didn't even know me without it. I had to grab him. Yeah, I forgot the hat today. The critical thinking part has to do with maintaining the integrity of your experience such that it's never overwhelmed by similarity, by sameness. It must always maintain. The other thing is never to allow utility to be the motivation for education. You cannot say I'm going to college for a job. So I'm the dean of the freshmen and seniors in Morehouse. Every time I talk to a parent about coming to Morehouse, I say, listen, first of all, it's home, and it's what saved my life. So whatever your son's about to do, he better not trifle with the institution. The second thing is this is holy ground. The third thing is if he wants a job, he should probably join the military, the police, the fire department. I mean, why waste your time learning? What has to happen is we have to cultivate and refine our sense of what it means to be a human being through study. College is for everyone, we just don't let everybody go. Because what we do in college is fundamentally force you to think deeply about difference, our gay brothers and sisters, how we marginalize women. A woman can get a PhD and be considered brilliant and never having read another woman. Do you understand that? And I tell students, I said, this is ridiculous. I can be considered brilliant and never touch a book by a woman. This is what college is supposed to cultivate, a sense of where are you in the world such that you're thinking about the marginalized, the oppressed, and more importantly as a man, the ones that I help oppress. And so the critical analysis has to be ongoing. It has to be perpetual. One must always say to oneself, where am I in the world such that I either foreclose possibilities for others or do my best to open up possibilities. And so the critical part is always being critical of oneself. Students don't want to be overly critical of themselves because they don't know how to get back to value. You understand that? They will tear themselves down, and then they need counseling. What I'm saying is, I look in the mirror every day and realize there's a bunch of problems, right? I hate what I see from time to time. But I have to ask myself, well, is that the value you seek? Is what you see in the, no, it has to be here, my heart, my care, my love, my respect, my extension of dignity and integrity to other people, such that if I were blind, I still see my value, right? And that's what has to happen. So that critical part has to always be self-critical analysis, critical of institutions, critical of your participation in the oppression of other peoples. This is what we need. And to your brilliant point, it's not about school necessarily. My mother didn't go to school, I told you. But she said, I've seen what Morehouse has done for these other Negroes, you about to get some of it. And so her point was, you're going to go. And we need to do a better job of how we compete against one another too. My last bit, it's okay to be competitive. It's okay. I told somebody, so I went to graduate school at Harvard, and I used to listen to the white kids at Harvard talk about Yale. If Morehouse talked about other schools that way, they would swear we were hating. And I can tell you what they used to say about the Yale student. How did you get in? With an ink pen and a piece of paper? I mean, this is how they talk about each other. And it's all in jest. We over-dramatize our competitiveness, and we can't even play with each other. Now, that's the young folk. Back when I was in school in the 80s, trust me, we used to go at it. My sister went to Clark. Trust me. Clark beat us in basketball a few weeks ago. First call I got was from her, right? Which is fine. But I think that's the beauty of being diversity of black folk and black voices. That takes critical analysis. That takes one's ability to laugh at oneself. And we don't do this. So we are constantly fighting and competing against. There are only 4 all-male schools in the country. Wabash, Hampden, Sidney, St. John's, Minnesota, and Morehouse. There ain't another example to be made such that CAU is compete. That's Howard. It ain't us. Spelman only has 1. Do you understand this? So we need to be clear about how we're doing our own evaluation, self-evaluation, self-critique, such that you don't become overwhelmed by someone else's success. And that's what I see every time on Twitter. Why do they get? Get your game up. Stop whining. If you don't think you're getting what you want, get your game up. And also never forget racism, sexism. Because I swear today, if Spelman was an all-male school, they'd be ranked in the top 10 in the country. Spelman is every black school in this country. If they fail, if Spelman fails, all of us are done. They're the only and highest ranked black school in the United States right now. I ain't hating on Spelman. I want them to be better, do better, get up high in the ranks, because they swear that black women could never do it in the first place, right? So my thing is, that's what's critical, letting yourself go and celebrating the brilliance and the genius of other folk, such that when we come together as HBCUs, we legitimately come together now, versus always looking over your shoulder like, yeah, you know, they ain't. Man, please, I know we don't do sports in Morehouse. I'm good. We do mines, though. Well, we do mines.
Where did your daughter go to school?
Well, my eldest daughter graduated Spelman in 21, and my youngest daughter is a junior at Spelman right now. And lastly, they had no choice. I told you what mother did. Yeah, told you no choice from birth.
Let's talk about resilience and joy. This is a final clip that we're going to show you all before we wrap up.
Racism has been a fault line running straight through the American experience. Race has shaped where black people could live, how they saw themselves, and what kind of future they could hope to achieve. But remarkably, black people survived the strictures of racism by creating their own world, a sepia world, a nexus of formal and informal spaces by us and for us.
When we talk about black social networks, what we're really talking about is how black people create spaces where we can be seen and where we can be heard by each other. They're a place to, celebrate. That often gets overlooked. When we talk about black life, particularly in America, it's like, sometimes you just want to celebrate how dope it is to be black. And that's important
particularly in a country that the best you can say is misunderstands black people, and the most damning thing you can say is doesn't care about black people.
Generation after generation, these organizations, institutions, and social networks have been a shelter in the storm, a place from which to demand that America confront its failures and finally live up to its ideals.
You know, folks are still going to HBCUs, thank God. Folks are still going to church, going to mosque. Folks are still organizing. Folks are still partying together. We're resilient folk. We're resilient folk. Even in our darkest hour, you know, there are these eruptions of joy.
What does Black Joy mean to you?
Black joy means being in a safe space and feeling free. Usually it's with other Black people where you feel like you can really be yourself. That's when you experience that joy. Without that joy, and I don't know how I would survive.
I think Black Joy is our genetic coding that's like throw your hands in the air and wave them like you just don't care, that common hip hop. That's what joy is. It's like no matter what burden has been put on the people that have this darker skin, there has been a way to shake it off, rise up, and to celebrate, and that is joy.
Being Black in America is taxing. Let's start there. Being an activist in Black in America is extremely taxing. To be able to do this work, you cannot do that without being whole first. You cannot take on the world without first taking care of yourself. And so I think it's really important that when we see trauma, that we resist that trauma with joy.
For me, Black joy is community. That sense of community manifested in our social relationships, our culture, and our laughter. I mean, laughter is at the heart of it.
On Juneteenth, finally a federal holiday, joyful celebrations of the triumphs of the Black past and hopes for a victorious future are on full display. It's a time to reflect on the enduring legacies of our small nation of people.
David, Black joy is
freedom. Black joy is freedom.
Black joy is freedom.
And when you feel free, Black joy is freedom. And that's freedom of mind, freedom of expression, just being free and not really caring about what others think about you. And don't try to conform. Because my biggest thing is that I think we got the whole integration thing wrong. Integration meant access, not assimilate.
Professor Davis, Black joy is
interacting. I think I can't be more excited and more, I don't know, empowered than being around Black people. I mean, when I chose my white graduate schools, I told them, I don't want I'm not looking for your Black faculty. I know you don't have them. I need to be in a city when I leave your campus, I can just be around Black people. And they sort of looked at me weird. I said, yeah, I just need to walk and see them. I want to bump into them. I want to look at their faces from time to time, because if I see you all's faces every day, that's going to be a problem, right? So I think the interaction, the engagement is the most powerful thing. Just like when you all responded, you saw that Black young lady, that's it for me. I can go to sleep now. I'm done, right? I just need to see you, and I need to see you smile. I need to look at you. And I know that people have problems, but I do like looking at a brother and, what up, you know? I mean, that is so, yes, je ne sais quoi.
And there is this universal thing that Black folk are like, what's up? You can see somebody way across the room, you're like,
yeah.
gonna get people in trouble doing that too. That's a story for another day. Keandre, Black joy is?
I think black joy is energy.
Ah.
It's something that you can't even put words to. You just feel it, you know it. You don't have to look over your shoulder and wonder, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the correct thing? You can just be yourself. And that is empowering. Yeah. It's empowering to go out and not be afraid of the things I say or the things I do, because it feels like family. Yeah. Really and true. So.
And for me, black joy really is about our history. Because everything that I do, and I say no a lot, but every time I show up in the community, it's because I think about the history. When there weren't people who probably couldn't show up but wanted to. That is my black joy. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes. Now, don't go anywhere because we have another treat for you, but I do want to thank David Linton, Professor Ilya Davis, Professor Cynthia Spence, DeAndre. Best of luck to you, brother. Thank you all so much. We have a treat for you. I'm going to have Ray come up, and he's going to tell you about what y'all about to embark on.
Let's give it up for Rose Scott. You guys enjoy yourselves? Black joy, right? We all know what that little girl was doing when she was up there. She swung the braids. We already know what that was. Let's give it up for our sponsors this evening, Bank of America and WIDA. Please give them a big round of applause. Again, this is an amazing event. This collaboration between WCLK and WABE. Want to thank our WABE family, Aisha, Melly, Sherry, the production crew. Let's give it up for everyone at WABE. I also want to thank the WCLK family this year, Eugene, our assistant station manager, Kerwin and Joy from our membership department. David, of course, is our program director. We thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for supporting public radio. So give yourselves a round of applause. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, Bank of America and WIDA. And let's give it up for Mr. Henry Louis Gates for this amazing production. So we could not talk about being black, black joy, HBCUs, Greek life without some stepping. So I invited my brothers from the Alpha Phi chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated at Clark Atlanta University to come up and give you guys a little show. So let's give it up for these brothers here. As well as all of the Divine Nine organizations that are representing tonight, give yourselves a round of applause. All right. Again, we thank you so much for coming out tonight. We want to thank our sponsors, Bank of America and WIDA, WABE. Mwah, we love you guys. WCOK, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening and continue Black Joy all the rest of the month. Have a good evening.
Cynthia, and where's David?
Very good. My brother, thank you. Oh, please, you see the. Oh, please, I'm in neighbor back bay. You know, right off the main stand, 227 TV show. Yes, ma'am. Can somebody take this for me, please? Hey, bro. Thank you. I'm good.
Ray, hold it when you're done so we can get to the top of the shot.
Gotcha. All right, you gonna look right here? Right ahead. All right.
Thank you.
Can I get that shot?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, and then step team, can I get y'all?